What are your unforgettably creepy moments? I saw the aftermath of what happens when a 350-pound man jumps out of a 20-story window. It does not look like what they show on TV. When I was 12 years old, my friends and I were riding our bikes through some woods down an old dirt road that wasn't much used anymore. I decided it would be cool for me to go off-road and rode off into the forest. I got about 50 feet before I got disorientated and started going towards the creek, which was in a dell down a steep hill. From there, something else I didn't know, so I crashed down the hill and hit this huge boulder collection before coming to a rest. Off toward the road, I could hear my friends calling to me, so I knew which way to go. I started over towards their voices and saw a super old rusted out car. Now, I was a huge license plate collector back then, and finding rusted out cars in the woods was not that odd of an occurrence, so I went to see if I could harvest the license plate. When I got there, I saw there were bones in the front seat and a pile of rags. It was full-on Raiders of the Lost Ark with a skeleton on a pike kind of thing. I screamed like a little girl and got the hell out of there. I told my parents later, who called the police, and after some investigation determined that the man had disappeared during a blizzard in the late 50s and was never heard from again. I met his widow and children and won an award from the town. I'll never forget that feeling. Creepy as hell. This occurred in 1981. He had been missing for 20 plus years at that point, and I am now a 43-year-old man. I have no long-term effects from this event. I remember it. I remember being scared at the time and then completely puzzled as to why finding something by accident and then telling my parents about it was such a big deal. I went in the basement and looked in the box where I thought that certificate might have been, but it wasn't there. My mom might have had it. I'll ask my sister if she's seen it. No, I didn't get the license plate. My friends and I went back after all the dust had died down and they had pulled the car out. I've not been back there in decades. The amount of time the body was there is kind of crazy to me, but it's also kind of nice, only kind of nice, that the family must have gotten at least a little bit of closure from knowing exactly what happened to him. More traumatic than creepy, but saw the immediate aftermath of an adolescent run over by the school bus next to the one I was on. It was a cold morning and there was steam coming off the body. I remember that and the spilled lunchbox. This is why they have sweeper bars on the front of the buses now, to make sure adolescents walk far enough in front of the bus that the driver can see them. I have a young daughter now, and these are the things that keep me up at night. Saw a dead guy pulled out of a creek on my parents' property when I was 16. He flipped his truck while high and drunk and trespassing. He decided to leave when the cops were called on him. He didn't make the turn onto the bridge and it flipped his truck into the creek. He broke his neck upon impact. A bunch of guys tried to get him out, but the mud was suctioning him down. When the EMTs and police showed up, they got him out and he was bloated and white by that time. They put him on the rescue sled to pull him up the bank. His bloated white head was bobbing because of his broken neck. That image is burned into my brain. I used to live in a funeral home, literally in a funeral home. My parents owned it, but we didn't have enough income to really support a home for ourselves, so we took part of the building and kind of converted it into an apartment. Due to some pretty bad planning on my parents' part, we had the living room right next to the area where we kept the bodies, which was right next to the embalming room. Basically, every day I'd see a random naked dead guy or two sitting on a table right outside where I was playing. Sometimes my dad would be working in the embalming room, you know what I mean by working, and since there were pretty big windows on the door, God knows why, I would get to see almost everything, from a guy getting stabbed and having his blood let out, to the egregious stitching that would have to be done to guys coming from the morgue. But as time goes on, you just get used to it, and all of it isn't really that scary. You don't really know any of the people that you see dead, so there's no real psychological impact on you. The only scary thing is when friends of the family get sent to the funeral home. That could put a man in the mental clinic. Growing up in the funeral home, now boys, stop playing with the embalming fluid. When I was learning to drive, my father would accompany me. There was a football game in town that the rest of my family was at, but I was not going for some reason. On my way home and into my neighborhood, a fairly large neighborhood, we went past a van, a plain white van that was off, until it turned on and followed us all the way to the road that my house is on. It went to the cul-de-sac. My father took the truck to the game, leaving no vehicles in the parking area and myself alone at home. That white van decided to pull into my driveway, so I ran into my father's closet and grabbed a shooty bang bang and walked out in my front porch with it drawn at the van. That van went into reverse and backed out of my driveway faster than it came in. It was a very strange experience, and I sat on my porch for a good 30 minutes before going back inside for the night. My neighbor didn't pick up his kids from school one day, so I had to break into his house. I found him on the basement floor with no clothes on. I could tell he was still alive, but obviously there was brain damage as he couldn't form words or even move. I later found out he had a brain aneurysm and he had no clothes on because it happened while he was having some alone time. Man can't even be alone and naked in his house without being worried about a brain aneurysm. God damn. Look, I won't lie, I can be a bit of a hypochondriac. It's like, you feel that pain in your chest off and like, oh God, is it over? I was working in an ice cream shop when I was in high school, and at night, in the winter, it would only be me and another manager. It was in a pretty nice area, and behind the store, there was a giant park that got really creepy at night. That night, the manager was a girl, like myself, not too much older than me, and when we are closing, we have to do trash. We were both pretty small, but we could easily do it by ourselves. I decided to take the trash out that night because she was counting money. So I get all the bags out, and I walk outside, and in the parking lot next to the trash, there is a man standing there. He was wearing sweats, and there was just this look of hatred on his face that I've never seen in anybody before. I ran back in, locked the doors to be safe, and did some dishes thinking that I could do the trash later. I walked into the main room of the store where there are all the windows, and he was standing there in the window just looking in, and I will never forget the smile that came on his face when he saw me again. It was the worst mix of evil and complete joy. I can't even describe how his eyes were. They were filled with hate. A hate that I've never seen on anybody before. I ran into the back room with my manager, and we hid there for what felt like 2 hours until the police came. By then, he was gone, of course. However, he was arrested a few weeks later for the brutal assault and killing of a girl my stature and hair color. Obviously, I don't know anything about this, and I'm so sorry you went through that. I'm sorry for a lot of the people that go through some of the stuff that they do on this, but that sounds absolutely terrifying. I was just saying the other day how crazy and just downright petty some of the motives that people have for doing certain heinous and brutal things to other people are. I was flying to India, and we had just stopped in Germany. I was 14 and sitting next to this old guy who I thought was asleep the whole time. I shake him because we landed, because he was kind of laying on me. No response. I was an unaccompanied minor, so when the stewardess came to get me, she looked at him, checked his pulse, and then everyone was ordered to stay where they were, including me. The paramedics came and declared him dead. I never knew for how long. I had never seen a dead guy up close before and was surprised at the time. I thought he would smell of something rotten when he died or would make a noise or something beforehand. To this day, I always think if I had noticed earlier, I could have helped him. I also had a dead guy lay on my shoulder for 8 hours, and I fell asleep during that flight as well, so there was a good chance I used his head as a pillow while I slept. Creepy, but that's life. Once when I was like 10 years old, my dad was unemployed and we were struggling for a few months financially, and some kid in school called me a broke bum over something I don't even remember, and he told me to buy some decent clothes and that I looked like a hobo. It wasn't that bad, he was just saying stuff to hurt me. That really struck a nerve, so after school I walked up to him while he was sitting on his bike, and I punched him so hard on the one side of his head that blood started coming out of his nose and his left eye turned red. He screamed, "Oh my God, I can't see!" I just felt sick to my stomach and felt like a monster. I just wanted to disappear that moment. But he was fine after a few minutes. It's good that you felt bad. Is it an excuse? No, but you felt bad, and that's a good thing because it means that you have empathy. But you know what? On the other hand, that kid probably never grew up to talk so much unnecessary smack ever again. I say unnecessary. You said to yourself, you don't know why you were arguing. You might have been the one at fault. You, sir, are an unreliable narrator. But that's okay, I am too. You seen these comments out here? They're killing me. When I was young, one of my friends was killed just outside of school in the woods. A week or so later, my friends and I were walking through them, like dumb little idiots. And we found the knife still covered in blood. One of the guys picked it up and took it back to the school. Luckily, it was a simple case and the guy was already arrested, or we could have messed up the evidence for the case. But needless to say, that was what put it in my mind that the murder had actually happened and that I needed to be more careful. When I was younger, I used to have really intense visual hallucinations. Some normal stuff, glowing orbs, floating hands, that kind of thing. But the creepiest thing that I ever saw was my own dead body on the floor in front of me, wearing the exact same clothes I was wearing at the time. You know, I literally just heard this the other day, but apparently if you drink more than 6 cups of green tea a day or something, you can start having hallucinations, apparently. I don't know if that's true, and I do not endorse anyone testing it out or whatever, because why the hell would you want to drink 6 or more cups of green tea anyway? This might not be the caliber of the other stories here, but this freaked me out when I first saw it. So like 4 years ago when I was in high school, I used to exercise in the basement of my house, which is connected to the garage because my house is built into the side of a hill. Anyway, I'm exercising when I hear this loud clicking noise coming from the garage. I had no idea what it was. It was like 10 p.m. and everyone else was either asleep or in their bedroom on the other side of the house. I opened the door to the garage and I can't even comprehend what I was looking at. A bat had gotten its wing stuck to some fly tape, and the clicking was its teeth against its bone. It was trying to bite off its arm. The clicking was so loud. I'm picturing it, the imagery, the darkness. It sounds creepy as hell. Hell, I remember one time I walked into my kitchen, got this weird colored LED light thing in it, and I turn it on, pitch black room turns to pure red. Scared the crap out of me, but this is way creepier. The bat, the imagery, the darkness, the lateness, it's all perfect. It's way scarier than my thing. Back in college, a junkie broke a window to get into my apartment, stole some stuff, a camera, some of my roommate's girlfriend's jewelry, whatever. Called the police, boarded up the window, and started to go to bed. Until my roommate pulled back his covers and found a blood-soaked rag hidden under his sheets. The guy had cut himself on the window and hidden the rag. Still no idea why he bothered. I want to say it was his attempt at hiding DNA evidence, but obviously it was a very bad attempt. When I was 13, me and my friends were hanging around town like usual. We went to the park first in the morning. We saw a man who looked to be in his 40s. He was wearing a hood and he had a long beard. He had a can of beer and got up and started walking toward us, so we ran. Later on, we were taking a shortcut through the library's car park to go to McDonald's, and we saw the same guy standing by some bushes staring directly at us. 2 of my friends, girls, started dancing for some reason. They hadn't seen him. It was only me that saw him. I told my best friend Walter, and we tried to get everyone else to hurry up. Walter turned around to check everyone and saw the guy in the bushes now. His fly was undone, and his dangly bits were hanging out. We ran as fast as we could, and we didn't see him any more times after that. I should certainly hope not. So this was pretty weird for me. My mom used to take me and my brother to the beach every summer for a week. Well, one year we're walking along the beach and we get pretty far. I was probably around 8 or 10 years old, so it felt pretty far to me, for whatever that's worth, to where the beach got kind of desolate. There we saw something lying in the sand. My mom just said it was a sea slug or some kind of worm from the ocean, and I bought it. Well, a few years later, I have the distinct memory of having a sudden Clarence moment and thinking to myself, that was no worm, that was a man's dangly bits. Yes, someone had cut off a man's dangly bits and it somehow ended up on a beach on the East Coast. A likely story, but it might also be something that is known as a geoduck, which does very much look like a one-eyed wiggly worm. Bus ride on vacation in Greece, windy mountain road, suddenly a load of bees, then really lots of bees, then all the bees. Rounded a corner to see a truck on its side, broken beehives all over the place. As our driver sped up to get away from the bees, I'm pretty sure I saw a flash of the driver of the crash truck falling to the ground, covered from head to toe in bees. Always assumed he was not getting up from that. Death by bees is not a way I would like to go, nor is it something I would like to witness. I was on an international flight, and upon landing, the flight attendant was unable to wake the lady in the seat directly behind me. They called the paramedic upon landing, but it was obvious that she was dead. I heard them say, "She's dead." And they made us all get off the plane so they could remove the body. Perhaps not creepy, but more of a did that really just happen type of moment for me. Also, when I was 16, I saw a guy get capped. It was on Thanksgiving, and that's about all I remember about it. In comparing the 2 plane stories that we have where people died on them, I can't help but think, how is it on one side you had people be like, "It's okay, young man, just stay there while this corpse is on top of you," and the other one where, reasonably, "Okay, everyone just get off the plane while we get the paramedics in here." Just different mindsets mindsets, I guess, or company process? Either way, I prefer one to the other. Not really nearly as creepy as most of these stories, but a few years ago, I was kayaking in western North Carolina. Beautiful day, pretty calm river, but the water was low and rocks were out in force. I kept having to push them off. At one point, I was coming up to a medium-sized brownish rock and preemptively tried to push off it and moved it. Thinking, that's weird, I continued to push it, only to turn around and realize that it was a dead dog. The face looked kind of mutilated, and now that I'd dislodged it from whatever kept it in place, it rode the white water and followed me down for a while. The worst part was that I kept finding them. 4 dead dogs, all seemingly killed violently, floating down the river with me, bumping against my kayak. That legitimately sounds like the worst kayaking trip ever. My friend and I had permission to go over to this abandoned house to basically loot what's left of the house and keep what we picked out. The house was empty except for junk and empty pill bottles and medication. The garage, however, was filled by the mounds of crap the previous tenants had left over. As we're rummaging through the crap and books, I find a bag filled with gun parts and triggers, lower receiver, barrel and firing pins, and a banana mag and another gun that was just missing the stock and firing pins. Gold mine. I quickly pocket that crap in my backpack and continue searching after finding this amazing loot, and I continue up into the attic. I find a small journal and a bunch of meds and needles and a bunch of government files and folders with red tape all over. The documents had redacted black lines and stuff, so all I could make out was that they had an operation initiated for deploying weapons or something. So after that, I read the journal. The journal belonged to the wife of the man who lived there. At first, it started off very dark. Stuff like he would start coming home late at night without announcing himself and would mutter and get angry. Later, he was being treated with meds for which I don't know and don't remember what meds was left in the attic, and apparently was a paranoid schizophrenic and was extremely abusive and would hurt the wife and not remember doing that a few seconds afterwards. She spiraled into depression and talked about self-deletion and stuff. Then one of her friends took her to church and it seems to make her feel better. The last time she saw him alive was when she went to get his meds refilled and later came home to find him dead by self-deletion. He had a lot of firearms and the police confiscated most of the guns. Shocked after reading it, I found another diary or book written by the husband and it was filled with poems about his wife, life, death, etc. His poems were nice, but I always keep wondering what really happened to the guy. I don't have the diary anymore, nor a photographic memory or evidence. You'll just have to take my word for it. Well, that just made me sad. I left my pillow in the car at a hotel parking lot outside of Atlanta as a kid. I, of course, went back to go get it at night, turned a corner only to be met with a hobo touching himself. Scarred me for life. I haven't had anything too creepy happen to me, but my dad has seen a lot of stuff. He used to be an accident investigator, vehicle accidents, in Iran. He's had 2 accidents that are burned into the back of his skull. The first was a bus that had some sort of metal pole, sorry for the lack of a better word, go through the front and skewer passengers. He explained how when they opened the bus door, there was blood spilling down the steps. The other was when he was at the police station where he worked. Before I start, let me say that it was a tradition to turn your truck's light off when you pass a police station. At this station, they had a sign saying not to because it caused a lot of car accidents. So what happened was that there was this 18-wheeler driving down and he decided to turn his lights off. At the same time, on the other side of the street, there were 3 young guys, ages somewhere from 18 to 21, in a car that would resemble a Mini Cooper. They had the stereo on full blast and pretty much having a good time. As the young guys were driving, they didn't see the 18-wheeler coming their way. I guess what happened was they didn't see it and pretty much drove on the wrong side of the road. You can guess what happened. I remember my dad saying how the music on the small car stereo went completely silent right when they crashed. The 3 guys died on impact. Worst part? The truck driver came in with his food pretty much saying, "Hey, where can I go eat?" Emotionless and not caring that he just killed 3 people. My dad and the other guys working there, they were friends, took the guy into a room and beat the crap out of him. I was a 13-year-old kid sliding down the side of a gravel pit in an old quarry. The pit was located close to a private graveyard dating to the 17th and 18th centuries. On what would be my last slide down the side of the pit, a skull rolled down after me, landing with a dry rattle against the small of my back. I ran home and told my mother. I was panicking. Ultimately, the police were called. A high school teacher of mine, a man with an anthropology degree, was was called in when it apparently became quite obvious that this was nothing recent. It turns out that the skull belonged to a person who had died of tuberculosis, as was not uncommon during colonial times, of being a possible victim of a vampire attack. They had been buried outside of the graveyard, face down. At some point after they had been buried for a number of years, they were dug up and some of their bones were rearranged. The rattle I heard from the skull was due to the individual's canines having been removed, and they were found inside the skull. I had no idea about people from the 17th or 18th century being like, oh, tuberculosis, no, vampire attack, and stuff like that. But there's also something really entertaining to me. It's so like, TV show-esque, I guess. Obviously, fiction imitates reality, but like the whole call the teacher from the high school with the anthropology degree, I don't know, that's just fun to me. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.